Hi, Jonathan Kraft here from APQC. I'm the manager of benchmarking services and thought I'd take a moment today to do a video specifically on how organizations or individuals are actually leveraging the framework. And we love the framework at APQC because it's the most widely used framework in existence, but it's also our most popular download year over year in terms of how organizations are trying to leverage that framework to really create some standardization within their organization. So what I thought I would do is I'd really talk about 5 use cases that organizations have in terms of how they're actually leveraging the process classification framework. The first one I thought I would talk to you about is really around that process discovery and standardization. And when we talk about process discovery and standardization, we find that organizations are really using the framework to build process maps or models within the organization. They're taking the what we do, which is the framework, and they're readjusting or moving process elements around to make sure that they can really start to outline from a visual perspective what are some of the steps in terms of not only what we do, but how do we execute these processes within our organization. Some of the other examples in terms of some of the process discovery are things around how they're identifying some of the current processes that exist within the organization, how they might want those future processes to look within the organization, really leveraging what we would call some process definitions and really defining and creating that standard language across the organizations between maybe business unit A and business unit B, or North America and South America, or different type of regions within the world. And the last one around some of the process discovery is really documenting what are some of their business capabilities within that organization. So that's real quick high level around what organizations are doing from process discovery and standardization. The next use case that we talk about is what we call process improvement. And when we talk specifically about process improvement, what we're really getting to from this perspective is what are organizations doing to really manage their process improvement efforts? And this one touches very closely on the previous one around discovery and standardization, but really from an improvement perspective, how can we go ahead and manage our process improvement efforts that are happening within an organization through some type of standardization and looking at what functions it touches? Where does it specifically touch? What parts of the organization does it touch? Are there different individuals or the same individuals or process owners that are involved or not involved that need to be involved from a framework perspective and ultimately from a process improvement perspective? As I mentioned previously, they're using it to identify what their current processes are and understanding where they are from a process improvement perspective. And then the last one around process improvement is really any type of auditing work that they need to do, any external certification that they might be applying for, and really making sure that they have all of their I's dotted, their T's crossed in terms of how that process is ultimately executed within their organization. The other way that organizations are really starting to leverage the framework is around technology implementation. And this one's a little bit interesting. The framework outlines the what you do. You obviously decide as an organization how you want to execute those processes, but the framework helps from a technology perspective because it can really help support those automation efforts by making sure that all of that blocking and tackling is really done initially before you start to put some type of software on top of a process or trying to execute a process. It gives you some insight to inventory applications from an IT point of view and understanding, do we have one part of our technology solution doing a lot of processes? Do we have one part that's only doing one process, but could be potentially doing other processes within the organization? And the last one from a technology perspective is really building that process library for an ERP implementation. Again, really driving around process standardization and creating some of that same language that might exist across the organization. So you can see I've gone through 3 use cases already. You can see they've crossed over in some certain areas. The next use case I wanted to talk about is really around benchmarking. And this was the original idea or the inception of the framework, is really to give organizations and individuals an opportunity to say, how can we compare our process performance? But in order for us to be able to compare our process performance, we need to make sure that we're really getting to that standardization that says when we define accounts payable or hire to retire, or whatever that process is within the organization, we can look at the sub-elements that are ultimately there and say, yes, the way that you're calculating cost or you're calculating cycle time is the same way that we might be calculating that information. So we can do a really nice, solid comparison with other organizations or maybe even other business units within the same organization. The other one, very similar from a benchmarking perspective, is really enabling benchmarking efforts between those groups and partners. Really making sure that if we do have a partner that we're working with, we do have other groups within our organization that we're working with, really just trying to make sure that there's that standardization that specifically exists. And the last use that I wanted to just talk about is really the idea around content management. And content management is becoming such a huge item for all organizations, big and small. And the design behind using the framework from a content management perspective is really organizations are saying, let's use it as a taxonomy to organize process knowledge that exists within our organization. And let's really try and reduce some of the redundant content that we have within the organization. And the way that works from a framework perspective, if you've ever taken a look at the framework, you can see there's that decomposition that specifically happens within the framework. So that structure there is from a level 1 all the way down to a level 4, level 5 in some cases. But there's also that standard 5-digit identifier at the end of each of our process elements that are there. And that 5-digit element never changes. So as you're looking to tell somebody to go look for certain activities, if you can use the framework or the hierarchy or the numbering ID to say, this is where that information specifically lies because it's finance related or because it's HR related, they know which areas of the framework to go to, or they know what numbers they're specifically looking for, versus the dreaded, oh, it's on SharePoint, go find it, and you spend half your day trying to look for something. So that's really how organizations are really leveraging the framework, and specifically the process classification framework. Would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, any thoughts, any ideas, even any feedback on the video or other ways that you're leveraging the framework, would love to hear from you. So don't be afraid to reach out. Thanks again for your time today. Have a great rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.